What is the creepiest disappearance case that you know about? In about 1971, a lady in Boca Raton reported her daughter missing. Her boyfriend was also missing along with his van. At some point over the years, she hired private detectives to look for the two. At one point she was told they were living in San Francisco. She was once told her daughter had a child. She never could understand why her daughter broke off contact and continued to look for her daughter. Along the streets in South Florida there are usually drainage canals that drain the Everglades to the ocean. Some are quite deep. In about 2000 they dredged a canal not far from her house and found the van. Daughter and boyfriend were both inside. All those years they were just down the street. At least she had closure. Brandon Lawson. He ran out of gas on the highway in the middle of the night and called his brother to come help him. Shortly after he called 911 and reported that someone had chased him into the woods and that he needed police. Eventually his brother and one police officer arrive at the scene and find his truck abandoned, but no sign of Brandon. Brandon calls his brother and says he's bleeding and is 10 minutes away from his truck. That was the last anyone ever heard from him, and searches of the area turned up empty. The Jamison family. The Jamison family, 2 adults, 1 young daughter, was interested in purchasing a plot of land in Oklahoma. They drive out in their pickup truck to check it out. Truck is later found abandoned. $32,000 cash found in truck, along with the Jamisons' IDs, wallets, mobile phones, and a GPS. The family dog was also left in the truck and was extremely malnourished. A camera is discovered. The final picture was of their daughter, 6-year-old Madison, who looks somewhat distressed. Security footage is uncovered, with the family appearing trance-like and not speaking to one another. The Jamison skeletal remains are found years later, dumped less than 3 miles from where the pickup truck was originally discovered. Remains show no signs of struggle. The Sodder children disappearance. On Christmas Eve, December 24, 1945, a fire destroyed the Sodder home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. At the time, it was occupied by George Sodder, his wife Jenny, and 9 of their 10 children. During the fire, George, Jenny, and 4 of the 9 children escaped. The bodies of the other 5 children have never been found. The fire was blamed on faulty wiring. However, one of the jurors involved in the inquest had, at one point, threatened George Sodder, saying his house would be burned and his children destroyed. The Sodders continue to question the official findings about the fire. They wondered why, if it had been caused by an electrical problem, the family's Christmas lights had remained on throughout the fire's early stages, when the power should have gone out. A telephone repairman told the Sodders that the house's phone line had not been burned through in the fire, as they had initially thought, but cut by someone who had been willing and able to climb 14 feet up the pole. A missing ladder belonging to the Sodders was found at the bottom of an embankment soon after the incident. A man whom neighbors had seen stealing a block and tackle from the property around the time of the fire was identified and arrested. He admitted to the theft and claimed he had been the one who cut the phone line, thinking it was a power line, but denied having anything to do with the fire. However, no record identifying him exists, and why he would have wanted to cut any utility lines to the Sodder house while stealing the block and tackle has never been explained. Jenny Sodder also had trouble accepting Morris' belief that all traces of the children's bodies had been burned completely in the fire. Many of the household appliances had been found, still recognizable, in the ash. A local crematorium supported her theory. The truck's failure to start was also considered. George Sodder believed they had been tampered with, perhaps by the same man who stole the block and tackle and cut the phone line. The only bone fragments ever found on the site were a few human vertebrae fragments, although these were confirmed to have never been exposed to fire. Rico Harris. He was a massive 6'9" former Harlem Globetrotter basketball player who had drug issues earlier in his life, but had made a full recovery and was getting his life back on track. He was driving along California's Interstate I-5 from his home in Southern California to Seattle to live with his girlfriend. He was somewhere just north of Sacramento, exhausted, and told his girlfriend over the phone that he wanted to check out the mountains. All calls stopped since his car was found a couple days later by a patrolman near a rest stop in the mountains. A massive search was launched. No signs of him. The strangest part? A driver later reported seeing a massive 69 individual wandering down the highway, just a mile from where the car was found. A week later, a search was relaunched. Massive size 17 footprints were found in the ground that were not there before. They were getting very close, and nothing. No trace, no body, nothing. Where did Rico go the first time he disappeared? Where was he for an entire week? And where did he disappear to again? The fact that someone could disappear twice is what makes this so damn mystifying to me. Dorothy Jane Scott, young divorced mom working at a head shop. One day at a meeting, a co-worker falls ill, so Dorothy and another co-worker take him to the hospital. It is found that he has a black widow bite. Following his treatment, Dorothy goes to get the car. When the co-workers make it outside, they see Dorothy's car speeding towards them. She doesn't stop, and that is the last time anyone sees her. The next day her car is found torched, but she is nowhere to be found. Over the next few years her parents start receiving taunting phone calls. Calls asking if Dorothy is home, a call claiming to know where she is, and so on. 4 years later, a construction worker finds charred bones next to a highway. Upon forensic investigation, it is learned that they are canine bones and the bones of Dorothy Jane Scott. It is deducted that they had been there for 2 years. Angela Hammond. While driving home, Angela Hammond stops at a phone booth to call her fiancé Rob and describes a creepy looking man in a pickup truck in the parking lot. Her fiancé suddenly hears Angela scream and drives into town to check on her. He passes by a pickup truck and sees Angela struggling with an unidentified man, but after attempting a pursuit, the transmission on his truck gives out, and this is the last anyone ever sees of Angela. She still hasn't been found and went missing in 1991. The 43 missing students from Mexico. I mean, singles get lost all the time, but freaking 43 people are hard to lose, you might think. General, the highway of tears, murders / disappearances. The fact that multiple serial killers may have been operating along the same desolate stretch of highway. BRRRRR. Specific. Dorothy Jane Scott. She received anonymous threatening calls for months before someone abducted her in a hospital parking lot. Her car was last seen by her friends, speeding away with the headlights on bright, so that it was impossible to tell who was driving. Her family continued to receive taunting calls from her stalker 4 years afterward, yet the man never stayed on the line long enough to be traced or identified. I'm sure there are stranger cases, but this one always creeped me out because I knew the guy. He and I were never friends, but ran in the same circles and had a lot of mutual friends. One night he was hanging out at my buddy's place playing video games and left around 9:30 or 10 PM to head back to his apartment. His place was only 3 blocks away, but his keycard was swiped at the wrong building, identical towers next to each other, and he tried to make a phone call to a friend that only lasted 2 seconds, but ended before our friend picked up. That was the last sign of where he was. When he didn't show up for classes the next day, our friend started putting out flyers. A few days later his family reported him missing, resulting in a massive search for him with helicopters, dogs, people walking all the fields near campus, the works. Not a trace was found, although it didn't help that it was snowing. Of course the police treated our mutual friend as a suspect, as he was the last person to see him as the nicest guy. No one who knew him suspected him for a moment, and also said maybe he was drunk and fell in the river or something, but they weren't drinking that much by a long shot, so that didn't make sense. Months later his body is found in an old abandoned barn owned by the school about a mile off campus. Apparently he was curled up behind some equipment in the basement with his shoes at the top of the stairs. The cop's story is that he was out taking photos, got lost, fell down the stairs, and died of hypothermia. They attributed the shoes to paradoxical undressing or him literally falling out of his shoes. Except that doesn't make any sense. According to my buddy he was hanging out with, he didn't have his camera on him. There's no mention of it in the police reports, and no sign that he ever made it back to his apartment to get his camera would have shown up on keycard records. In addition to that, you could see his apartment tower from the building he was found in, so being lost doesn't make much sense, and his body was already desiccated and partially decomposed when they found it, so I'm not sure how they knew hypothermia was the cause of death. He was also found to have cuts on his hands, and the room he was found in had been locked. The police claim that when he fell down the stairs he hit the door hard enough to unlock and open it and cut his hands on the doors. Somehow. Personally I think he was murdered. Edit. This is John Lassiner from Iowa State I'm talking about in case you want to look it up. Edit 2. U/Magoo909 reminded me that a couple and one police officer actually searched that building a few weeks before his body was found and didn't see him. So either 3 people searched the building without noticing his shoes, the broken door and his body, or it was moved there later. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. I can't wrap my head around how at the same time practically anything you do is monitored, recorded, and stored, but we somehow still manage to lose a whole freaking passenger aircraft. Ray Gricker, he was the Center County District Attorney in PA. In 2005 he went on a road trip never to return. His car and cell phone were found in a town between State College and Harrisburg. His laptop was found ruined by the Susquehanna River. No one knows what happened to him. Some speculate his disappearance is connected to the Penn State sexual abuse scandal, which came to light in 2011. The murder of Dorothy Ann Scott. Essentially she was being stalked by somebody who claimed to be in love with her and would not leave her alone. The calls were innocent at first, but became more demanding and angry as time went on. Dorothy, of course, quite understandably became more stressed out and in fear of her life. She had even taken up a self-defense class at a local community center. The last anybody ever heard from her was over 30 years ago. A co-worker had been bitten by a poisonous spider, and she and another co-worker, also a woman, drove him to a nearby Arizona hospital to receive proper medical treatment. After everything was all clear, she went into the parking lot to grab her car and drive to the main entrance to pick up her friends. Except she pulled barreling out of the parking lot extremely fast, going the wrong way, almost hitting her co-worker who was trying to make sense of what was going on. She had been on the way to pick up her son, and they found the car she drove on fire in a ditch off an exit on the interstate somewhere in the desert. She was never seen again. Her mother still receives calls from who the police presume is the suspect. The calls discontinued several years ago, prompting theories perhaps the killer is dead or has disappeared. Edit. Got a couple details wrong, since I did this off of memory before leaving for work this morning. This happened in California, and her name is Dorothy Jane Scott. Impersonally perplexed by the disappearance of a Japanese woman named Mayumi Erashi, the 27-year-old left her house stating that she was going to meet a certain classmate of hers and never returned. Her older sister, Yoko, later checked with this classmate, who stated that such a meeting was never promised and thus never happened. Her whole family started searching for her, but to no avail. There was an investigation which pinned a guy called A as the prime suspect. This was due to another note that Mayumi left, stating how she had been betrayed and was sorry. In addition, Yoko stated that she had received a call from May, who claimed to have met Mayumi that afternoon she disappeared and wanted to be in jail if Mayumi ever turns up dead. The day after Mayumi's disappearance, police tailed A and found him entering a mountain or a foresty place or something, carrying 2 cans of juice. The police then lost track of him. Now, it would seem like Mayumi's family, especially her sister Yoko, were extremely cooperative in helping the police, and that A was the prime suspect. This case blew up over the internet after an interview with the father. A news station went to interview the family over this case, and upon interviewing the father, many internet users spotted a mysterious note posted on a wall behind him that the news crew failed to catch. The note, in Mayumi's handwriting, said, "Don't trust what Yoko says." N. A little later this comment will probably get buried, but worth a shot. In high school, my mom's best friend's brother went out across the water to an island in Anacortes, Washington with 2 friends. One of the boys' parents lived on the water, so they could hear the boys across the water on the island that wasn't too far away the entire night. All of a sudden they went silent, and they were never seen again. No rowboat, no life jackets, and no bodies were ever found. They were presumed drowned, but what's bizarre is that the parents never heard screaming or distress from across the water. Okay, so this was a friend of mine. Yes, an actual friend of mine. He was the father of a very good friend. He went for a rather short hike with his wife, her children and a friend of hers somewhere in Bavaria. The children were dropped off at a climbing area, while the three of them went on for about 10 to 15 minutes, until they found a nice spot to sit down. At least the two ladies sat down. This was at a sort of crossroads behind two large rocks, so they couldn't see the path they would continue to hike. My friend decided to advance a bit, so that he could take some pictures. At this point they were a 45 minutes walk away from the car. The ladies talked for about 10 minutes at most, then it slowly began to rain, and they decided to leave. So the wife called her husband's name, but he didn't respond. She was holding his cell phone. They went past the rocks and there was no one to be seen. It was a rather large area. You would have needed to walk 10 minutes straight to get out of sight here. I was there the next day and looked around. There were a lot of nice places to take pictures, so it's weird that he would spend the 10 minutes walking straight away. The wife told the authorities about this. They searched the area with helicopters and dogs. The dogs picked up a scent and some ranger dude even saw him walking around somewhere where the dogs also found a scent. The trail went cold at a cliff aside the path that was difficult to search/climb. At the bottom there was no trail for the dogs. There was nothing more anyone could do. He was missing for about a year, until the body was found by a mushroom picker who went deep into the area he knew his way around. It was nowhere near where they thought he went, and there were no bones smashed as they would have been if he fell from a cliff. They could identify him via DNA analysis, but no one knows what exactly happened. He had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but it wasn't bad yet. The worst I've seen him was forgetting where he put his keys the day before. Other than that, he was a bright and conscious person. This actually happened locally to me. A woman went missing a few months ago from a neighboring town. She was a school teacher, and unlike her to just up and go, her husband tried saying she has done weird shit like that before. Then they find her car abandoned. Turns out she has filed a domestic violence claim against him before, and tried to retract it. So we're all like, yeah, the husband killed her. A couple months go by, and more stuff about this Looney Tune is popping up. Sound of a gunshot picked up by neighbor's security camera. Sounds of them yelling and him barking like a dog. It was weird. Helicopters flew over the swampy area by my job looking for her body. Finally, a few weeks ago, he calls the cops, tells them where to find her, and hangs himself. Sure as shoot they find her body right where he said. Releaseable. He was 21 and went missing in the Jefferson Wilderness area of Detroit, Oregon. He went on a day hike alone. His vehicle was found at the trailhead, but he has never been located. I only know of the case because my husband and I went on a hike to the Stallman Point Fire Lookout and saw his missing poster. His vehicle was left sitting at the trailhead for months in case somehow he survived and made it to his car. So eerie knowing at any point we could have passed his body on the trail. Because it's literal cliffs, he could be anywhere on the mountain. My wife had a friend in the 80s who left her husband and two kids to join a cult. Nobody, not even her family, ever heard from her again. In Toronto, 5 men from the gay village are missing between now and 2010. Police haven't officially found anything linking them directly, but all of them frequented the village, and they share a common demographic. All of them were active on gay dating apps, and 3 of the men are the same ethnicity. Police suspect foul play, but say there's no proof of a serial killer, but many beg to differ, including a UOFT criminology professor who believes that these cases show historically classic red flags of a serial killer. What freaks me out is how they vanished completely in such a densely populated area, but it's also arguable that there's a problem with the way police are handling it. Still, if this is a serial killer, then this is clearly someone who knows what they're doing.